2,500 personalities, one victim, one of the worst cases of child abuse in Australia. This is the story of Jeni Haynes. Dr. Jeni Haynes, known today simply as Jeni, grew up in Greenacre, a quiet suburb in Western Sydney. To the outside world, she looked like any other child in an ordinary family. But behind closed doors, Jeni was living a nightmare so dark that it would take decades for her truth to finally surface. After surviving years of horrific abuse at the hands of her father, Jeni not only fought for justice, she made legal history. Her battle would one day change the way courts viewed victims of unimaginable trauma. But that journey was long, painful, and filled with scars that shaped every part of her life. Despite her suffering, Jeni was relentless in reclaiming her power. She poured herself into education, spending 18 years at university. She earned a degree in psychology, a master's in legal studies, another in criminal justice, and eventually a PhD focusing on victims of crime. It was as if she was determined to understand from every possible angle how someone like her could be shattered by violence and how survivors could find their way back. Today, Jeni lives in Australia, not just as a survivor, but as a scholar, an advocate for those silenced by abuse. But to understand Jeni's courage, you must first understand her childhood. The Haynes family originally lived in Bexley Heath, a suburb of London. Then in 1974 they packed their lives into suitcases and relocated to Australia. Jeni was only 4 years old. For most children, a move like this would be an adventure. A new home, new friends, a new start. But for Jeni, there was no fresh start. The abuse had already begun in London, and in Australia, it escalated into sadistic, near-daily violations. Jeni was forced to endure years of torment that no one around her seemed to notice. Not her siblings, not even her mother. She believes that her family had no idea what was happening in secret. Her father was cunning. He kept Jeni isolated, restricting her social activities, cutting off opportunities for her to be noticed by other adults. At school, she learned to shrink herself, quiet, invisible, careful not to draw attention, because attention meant danger, because whenever she was seen, she was punished. One chilling example stands out. Jeni had a natural gift for swimming, and her coach once approached her father to encourage her talent. Any other parent might have been proud, but Jeni paid the price for being seen. Her father punished her simply because another adult had taken notice of her. For Jeni, visibility was not a blessing. It was a threat. And so, she stayed silent. She stayed small. And behind closed doors, the abuse continued year after year, until she was 11 years old. In 1984, the family moved back to the UK, and shortly after, Jeni's parents divorced. By then, the damage had already been carved deep into her mind, her body, and her soul. But what makes Jeni's story so different is not only the scale of the abuse she suffered, it's how her young mind found a way to fight back. From as early as 4 years old, her brain did something extraordinary. It created new personalities or alters. Each one carried a fragment of her pain, shielding her from trauma she could not yet comprehend. Over time, this coping mechanism would multiply, creating thousands of identities within her, an entire internal family built for survival. In May, standing before a courtroom packed with lawyers, reporters and jurors, Jeni Haynes delivered a victim impact statement that left the room in stunned silence. She had waived her right to anonymity, an extraordinary act of courage, so that the world could finally know the truth, and so her father, Richard Haynes, could be named for what he truly was. "My dad's abuse was calculated and it was planned. It was deliberate, and he enjoyed every minute of it," she told the court. She didn't hold back. Her words were raw and unflinching, painting the picture of a man who had terrorized his daughter with chilling consistency. "He heard me beg him to stop. He heard me cry. He saw the pain and terror he was inflicting upon me. He saw the blood and the physical damage he caused. And the next day, he chose to do it all again." For years, Richard Haynes had brainwashed Jeni into believing he could read her thoughts. He convinced her that if she so much as thought about the abuse, let alone spoke of it, he would kill her mother, her brother, and her sister. "My inner life was invaded by Dad," Jeni recalled. "I couldn't even feel safe in my own head. I could no longer examine what was happening to me and draw my own conclusions." Desperate to protect her thoughts, Jeni found a secret outlet. She hid her feelings in song lyrics, using music as code for the things she couldn't say aloud. When she worried about her siblings, she whispered, "He ain't heavy, he's my brother." When she thought about her suffering, she clung to the lyrics, "Do you really want to hurt me? Do you really want to make me cry?" But the abuse went far beyond threats and manipulation. In court, the judge spent more than an hour detailing Haynes's depravity. He had not only violated his daughter, he had degraded her, berated her, and destroyed her sense of worth. During one assault, Haynes sneered at her and told her, "No one loves you. I can do what I like to you. No one cares. You're nothing." What she endured was so overwhelming that her young body would often pass out while it was happening. The torment had started in 1974 when she was only 4 years old. In one particularly disturbing act, Haynes used her own hand puppet, Sweep, to muffle her screams as he committed something cruel, like an animal with no moral compass. On another occasion, when she was still barely 4, he coerced her into touching him in a way that was completely inappropriate. This continued until 1981, when Jeni turned 11. Shortly afterward, the family moved back to England, where her parents divorced. But the scars of those years would never leave her. Jeni was also denied medical care for the injuries she suffered. The untreated damage from the beatings and assaults developed into lifelong conditions that continue to affect her health today. But Jeni's mind had found a way to endure. To survive the relentless violence, her psyche split again and again, creating new personalities or alters each one carrying a piece of her pain. The very first was Symphony, a 4-year-old girl who, Jeni explains, exists in her own time reality. She suffered every minute of Dad's abuse, and when he abused me, his daughter Jeni, he was actually abusing Symphony, Jeni told the BBC. Symphony's voice was higher, girlish, almost breathless. She was a child trapped in time, frozen in the moment the trauma began. But Symphony was not alone for long. When she couldn't endure, she created others, new alters, each designed to take on the worst of the horrors. An alter would walk out the back of Symphony's head and take on the distraction, Jeni explained. My alters have been my defenses against my father. Over the years, hundreds turned into thousands. Each alter had a purpose. Some were children, forever stuck at the age Jeni was when the abuse began. Others were protectors, stepping forward to shield her from the violence when she couldn't. Still, others carried specific memories, smells or sights, fragments of terror too overwhelming for one person to hold. Together they became what Jeni calls her survival army. Unlike the exaggerated portrayals of dissociative identity disorder seen in Hollywood films, Jeni's condition wasn't theatrical. It was tragic and deeply practical. Her alters were not there for drama, they were there for survival. When the abuse became unbearable, an alter would step in. One might take over during school hours, ensuring Jeni could focus on her lessons. Another would endure the worst moments of harm. Still, another would soothe and comfort the rest when it was over. It was this constant shifting of identities that allowed Jeni to live through the unlivable. On one hand, it was her salvation. Without the alters, she might not have survived. But on the other hand, it was a lifelong burden. The fractures in her identity made it nearly impossible to live like an ordinary adult. It wasn't until decades later, in 2009, that Jeni Haynes finally reported the abuse. For her, it had taken years of therapy, courage, and self-discovery to find the strength to face her father in the open. But even then, justice did not come quickly. The police investigation stretched on for nearly 10 years, a decade of waiting, of uncertainty, of reliving the past over and over again, until, at last, Richard Haynes was brought before the courts and sentenced. But capturing him wasn't simple. In 2017, Haynes was extradited from Darlington, in northeast England, where he had been living quietly among Jeni's extended family. While there, he had served a 7-year sentence for another crime. Even behind bars, he poisoned the truth, painting Jeni as a liar and a manipulator to relatives who had no idea of the horrors he had inflicted. Experts confirmed what Jeni had always known. Her condition, dissociative identity disorder, was not random, not imagined, not theatrical. It was the direct result of prolonged extreme abuse committed in what should have been the safest place of all, her own childhood home. The physical damage was devastating. Jeni's body had carried the cost of her father's violence for decades. She was left with life-altering injuries affecting multiple parts of her body, including her vision, jaw, and digestive system. In 2011, she underwent a major colostomy surgery that left her with a permanent colostomy bag. But the wounds weren't only physical. Jeni continues to endure flashbacks, hearing and dental issues, eyesight problems, and lifelong struggles with mental health. On the day of the trial, there was only one woman on the witness stand, but from her came 6 different voices. Each belonged to a personality created to endure the unimaginable abuse inflicted by Richard Haynes. In March 2019, the court allowed Jeni to testify not only as herself, but also through Symphony and 5 other alters, each prepared to reveal their own fragments of horror. Because of the case's traumatic nature, it was heard by a single judge instead of a jury. I walked into the court, sat down, took the oath, and then a few hours later, I got into my body and out of it, Jeni told the BBC. Inside the dock, Richard Haynes sat in prison greens, staring ahead or at the judge as his daughter described how he had raped and tortured her repeatedly. Crimes Australian police called one of the worst cases of child abuse in the nation's history. This was no ordinary trial. In a landmark first for Australia and possibly the world, a victim with diagnosed dissociative identity disorder was allowed to testify through her alters. Symphony, the 4-year-old, relived in heartbreaking detail 7 years of crime records. Muscles, an 18-year-old male alter, spoke to the physical abuse. Linda, an elegant young woman, testified about the toll on Jeni's education and relationships. Prosecutors also presented psychologists and DID experts who confirmed the reliability of Jeni's accounts and explained how her disorder preserved memories that might otherwise have been lost. "We were not afraid," Jeni said. "We had waited so long to tell everyone exactly what he did to us, and now he couldn't shut us up." In her victim impact statement, Jeni revealed the lifelong struggle of living with more than 2,500 personalities. "We spend our lives being wary, constantly on guard. We have to hide our multiplicity and strive for a consistency in behavior, attitude, conversation and beliefs, which is often impossible. Having 2,500 different voices, opinions and attitudes is extremely hard to manage. I should not have to live like this. Make no mistake, my dad caused my multiple personality disorder." In May 2019, she used over 30 alters to deliver a 17-page statement, recounting 7 years of terror and the permanent injuries she continues to live with. Sitting just meters away from her father during sentencing, Jeni later admitted she had to resist slapping the smirk off his face after watching him listen with what she described as a faint, mocking smile. On September 6, 2019, Judge Sarah Huggett sentenced Richard Haynes to 45 years in prison, with a minimum of 33 before parole. At 74 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. His crimes, she declared, were profoundly disturbing and completely abhorrent and appalling. She emphasized it was impossible for any sentence to reflect the true gravity of the harm inflicted. After reviewing his psychological report, Judge Huggett concluded there was nothing in his personal history to mitigate his actions. The only available conclusion is he was sexually attracted to his young daughter and that he derived a perverted gratification from exerting complete power over his vulnerable daughter. Richard Haynes had originally faced 367 charges, ranging from rape to indecent acts. Midway through the trial in March, he abruptly changed his plea to guilty, perhaps recognizing that the evidence Jeni and her alters could provide was overwhelming. The district court in Sydney also heard that Haynes had been threatened multiple times in prison, had attempted suicide in 2017, and was kept under CCTV surveillance in isolation. But when his sentence was finally handed down, he showed no emotion. He made no statement, and he refused to look at his daughter as he was taken away. For Jeni, however, this was more than punishment for her father. It was a breakthrough for survivors everywhere. "I passionately want my story told," she said. "I want my 10-year struggle for justice to literally have been the fire that ripped through the field so that people behind me have a much easier road. If you have MPD as a result of abuse, justice is now possible. You can go to the police, you can tell, and you will be believed. Your diagnosis is no longer a barrier to justice." Since learning the truth about the abuse, Jeni's mother, who divorced Richard Haynes back in 1984, has become one of her daughter's strongest supporters. The two women, once divided by silence, now stand side by side in Jeni's pursuit of justice. But for decades, Jeni's road to healing was anything but easy. Again and again, she sought help for her trauma. Again and again, she was turned away. Counselors and therapists doubted her story. Some said it was too extreme to be true. Others admitted it was so traumatic. They simply could not handle it. And so the woman who had survived the unimaginable, who carried more than 2,500 personalities inside her mind, was left to face her pain alone. But Jeni refused to be silenced. Her resilience, her determination, and the unwavering support of her mother would become the foundation of her fight, not just for herself, but for every survivor still waiting to be believed.